Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. Welcome to Connect Africa. I hope you all are doing good wherever you are. We have been doing this analysis, giving African perspective for what's happening in the continent and globally that matters to us. So we welcome you all. Thank you very much for those of you who have been here earlier than us. Even I see here, Lion Rules the Jungle. Thank you. Very important things that you commented there. We take a note on that one. So without further ado, for today, we chose a topic to look at the U.S. foreign policy towards Africa. And that is what it is going to be analyzed by Kwame here. I also welcome Kwame to us. So while he's getting ready, I will just say something, as an intro. Welcome, Kwame. I was welcoming you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who's, on the channel, on the platform.
Yeah.
It's very important. It's very important that you are here so that we can have this dialogue. And if you think that you have anything to say to contribute, you can, raise your hand or, drop a message and maybe Mahlet will allow you in so that you can say a word or two,
Yeah, sure.
on this topic, especially on this topic. I don't know where is our brother Dejuma. Probably could have something to say, Lion rule the jungle. If you have something to say,
Yeah.
please let us know that you want to make a contribution to this particular topic. This is a very important topic, and it has to do, of course, with the U.S. foreign policy on the African continent. We want to explore, U.S. foreign policy from an African perspective, and we will also compare this to other interests on the African continent. We have Arabs; they have interests in Africa. We have seen them recently coming in,
Hmm.
with a lot of force. We have seen the Turkish, right? Of course, the Turkish. I don't know whether they are
A
Arab
lot
or
of
European.
boys in the region. Yeah, we see
Yes,
Turkey, we
yes,
see Gulf,
yeah.
we
So we are
see
seeing,
India.
yes.
Hmm.
Yes, yes, we are seeing Turkey interfering in the north, and of course, it's not interfering maybe to some extent, but it is interfering. If we will be realistic, is interfering in Libya, and also has been invited. Turkey, the same Turkey has been invited by the government of Ethiopia to intermediate between them, to reconcile them, to play a reconciling role between
Correction.
Ethiopia and
It
Somalia.
invited itself. It invited itself.
I thought that the Prime Minister
No,
Abiy
no, no,
invited
no.
Ethiopia.
You know
That's what
when
I
it
saw.
happened, it was the BRICS summit when the foreign ministers met in June. So
Okay.
Turkey was, I think, part of it in some kind of meeting. I think it's BRICS, and then on the sideline, the foreign minister, our foreign minister, had a meeting with this official because Turkey basically now runs the port of Mogadishu, which is the capital of Somalia. Turkey runs, weaponize, and everything, trains the military, the army of Somalia. In fact, Somalia is kicking out the African Union peacekeeping mission, the African transition, something, but still, from the African Union, and getting this so-called international force, which is partly Turkey. So now Somalia is with Turkey and Egypt. So Ethiopia didn't like that. And so they were having that meeting. So that's how they initiated, okay, you know what, we're going to
So,
mediate.
so,
But
so we can say
they have
we can
interest.
basically okay. Okay, so we can basically say that Turkey invited itself, and of course that's the interference we were talking about. So I was holding back on calling it an interference because I thought that the Ethiopian government, invited, because I saw an article online where they were saying that the Prime Minister Abiy is the one who invited Turkey to mediate between these
Really?
misunderstandings. Yeah, I saw some article online which was
Uh,
saying like that. But generally, of course, Turkey is doing all this because it has interests on the African continent. That's basically the point. That the United States has interests on this on the other side. Turkey has interests, and we'll compare also on that. The Arabs have interests. The Indians too have interests, and we have seen them coming in a major way. on the African continent, buying up ports, like in Tanzania. And of course, the buying and the leasing, that has been a point of contention between our platform and other people who think that the Indians are not buying, they are leasing. And then, of course, we have seen also the airport, the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, which we know is a very important airport, in the East African region, and of course even on the African continent, because it's one of the busiest airports, and it's being leased or is being sold to an Indian. And these are Indians, of course. The Chinese, of course, we know them very well. I don't know whether they are our friends or not. So they are also here. They have interest. The Europeans, now that they have separated themselves from Russia, or they have been forced by the United States to abandon, or they are boycotting, we could say they are boycotting Russia's energy, cheap energy. We don't know what they want to do with that, how they want to benefit, the fact that their industry is going to get problems if they don't have this cheap energy. Now, the Europeans, of course, they will be looking to Africa, for cheap energy. All these, interests which we see, and of course, we want to compare that with the United States and put it together. That's what basically we want to look at today. So back to you, Mahlet. Thank you very much. So if you are out there, call your neighbor, call your friend, so that we can, have a discussion on this United States foreign policy in Africa from an African perspective, because we have seen the Americans, here and there, the State Department, officials, diplomats from the United States coming out and claiming to be talking for Africa and its foreign policy, how they have huge plans for the African continent. But do we, as Africans, also see it in the same way? These, interests, or these what they call partnership, recently they have been calling it partnership. Is it really beneficial to us as Africans? Does it make sense to us even? So these are the things that we want to, to look into. We want to beam a torch into, so that we can be able to understand. Back to you, Mallet.
All right, then. So, okay. So basically, the United States have put these three things as their foreign policy towards to Africa, like advancing trade and commercial ties with key African states. I don't know what that means, which are the key African states. Maybe these are what we call the anchor states. The other one is the other foreign policy is the second one, protecting the United States from cross-border health and security threats. Look at the words, okay? Number three is supporting key African states' progress towards stability. So what I see is what they are practicing is number two, just peace and security, democracy, this and that. Now, what is generally the US foreign policy in Africa, and what does it look like? You may also compare it, the one with China. But yeah, and if there is to whose benefit, of course, I mean, it's their foreign policy, but does it benefit Africa at all?
So basically, the U.S. foreign policy in Africa, of course, did not start, today. It started way back when the African countries started entering, the phase of being independent states, and of course, to some extent, the US even encouraged Britain to drop its colonies on the African continent. Of course, that has to do with the 1970s and 1950s, 1957, starting with the Ghana, of course, in sub-Saharan Africa, and then of course that process went on and to other places where Britain was, a colonial exploiter on the continent. So this is how the United States came into play itself. So it presented itself not as a colonizer, but as we have seen even up to today, that it presents itself as a guardian of democracy and human rights. So this is again how it presented itself, and to the extent that even people like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had hope that the United States would be able to help the African continent to industrialize, because Nkrumah was, as we know, a visionary who thought that if we unify, we'll be able to industrialize rapidly and improve the lives of our people, right? So when he becomes the leader of government in Ghana, he takes a trip to the United States. I think this was 1956. He takes a trip to the United States because I think he became a leader of government in 1954. He takes a trip to the United States. In that trip, it was both to encourage the people of African descent, and that is the African Americans, the Africans in the United States, to encourage them to come to the continent, and play a role in the reconstruction of the African continent, because he believed that they have more they were more skilled in certain areas. All right, they had capacities in certain areas, especially when it comes to engineering, industrialization, and all these new industries of the period of that time. So in that trip, while he wanted to achieve this, he hoped to achieve this of encouraging the Africans in the diaspora to come to the continent and play a role, and of course, which we saw that people like Maya Angelou, the poet, would come over here. W.E.B. Du Bois, Nkrumah worked directly with George Padimore, right? He worked with all these people who were diaspora, and actually people like George Padimore, he was Nkrumah's almost advisor in almost everything, because he was his architect. Other people, they were saying that Nkrumah actually learned a lot of things from George Padmore. He was his mentor. He was his ideologue. Other people said he was his ideologue. He was the ideologue or the architect of the revolution in Africa. So he learned a lot of things from these people who were Africans in the diaspora. Now, while Nkrumah wanted to achieve this, uh, he also hoped that the United States as a country would help, the African continent with technology transfer, right, and capital. And of course, we know that the United States emerged from the Second World War as the most powerful country. So by the 60s, 50s, 60s, the United States was very powerful, extremely powerful. It had a lot of money, it had a lot of rich people. So he hoped that things like energy systems, like dams and, research, all the types of technology transfer, manufacturing of steel, the United States would help, to transfer some of its technology to Africa, working with Africa. So, of course, Nkrumah would get a rude awakening to find out that the United States was not really interested in this. It was not interested in, transferring, technology to Africa. And that is how Nkrumah himself would become very radicalized towards against the United States. And after, of course, realizing that it is not interested in making any contribution, but rather it is instead interested in the recolonization of Africa, but only this time covertly, covert recolonization of the continent. It was not interested in making any improvements on the continent. So, but of course, the United States from that period has continued on to present itself as a country, a benevolent, imperialist who has come around to make improvements. And his relationship, Nkrumah's relationship with the United States, would be, even more disturbed or exacerbated after the Congo crisis. All right, the United States played a huge role in the killing of the Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, who was Patrice Lumumba. So after Nkrumah seeing this, he became very hostile towards the United States, and which led him even to publish that book called Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. Because what he saw is that uh, what the United States was doing is that it was taking over the former colonies of Britain. Where Britain was leaving, the United States was taking over. Now, it was taking over with capital, all right? It was coming with a lot of money and taking over these territories. And that money actually did not come that the United States was investing in our countries, okay? That it was investing in infrastructure like what you see China doing today. And of course, the United States had money, had a lot of money. It had the ability to do that. Even today, it has the ability to do that. But it did not do it. It was not doing it. What it was doing is that instead it was carrying out on the continent subversive activities, overthrowing governments. That is what it was doing, dividing the continent, making sure that the Africans are divided, that they are not operating together. And of course, it was working with its brothers, the Europeans, okay, because the Belgians themselves still had interest in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But all the efforts Nkrumah was making on the continent to make sure that the countries come together after independence, immediately when they enter independence, were being countered, by the United States and its allies, Belgium, Britain, and France. Of course, they were hugely operating on the African continent. And I think that there's even a book which was Susan, I think it's Susan Williams, who published the book on the CIA's operations in Africa. It was published, I think, in 2021. It looks at all those years. I think there's someone who always posts that book in our chat, one of our viewers. So she looks at all these years and what happened and the CIA's operations during that period. So when you look at all this history all the way to the 70s, whereby now, after the United States playing a huge role, which we are some of the stuff which is coming out today, we are understanding today, it even played a role in the overthrowing of, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah himself, and of course the killing of other heads of state of the African continent, who majorly had an interest in, in advancing, or who had huge interest in advancing the interests of the African continent. Yes, that's the book called The White Malice. Susan Williams, thank you. Our one of our viewers is Lion Champion, who said that. Yes, so I've read that book, and I think it's important that all of us go and read it. It was published in 2021, I think. So it's a very good book, which shows, the United States and how it operates. So this relationship, which was set in this period, now defined the United States policy in the in Africa and its foreign policy basically. So it went on, of course, to start taking resources now from the African continent. As we know, the bomb which was dropped on Nagasaki was made with uranium which they took from the Democratic Republic of Congo. All right, which was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These bombs. So this then set the stage for United States, relationship with the African continent. And of course, after the overthrow of these leaders, now the World Bank consolidated its position. All right. Remember all the money which the United States had, which we hoped that it would help us to build ourselves, help us to industrialize. Instead, it worked against the African continent. Right? It was put in the World Bank, and then the structural adjustments, of course, were unleashed. And for those who want to understand what, of course, the structural adjustments did and what the World Bank and the IMF did in the 70s, the industrialization, that's what it achieved in the African continent, this encouraging industrialization of the African continent. So you can read, Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, who were published about this, about the World Bank and IMF's operations on the African continent. Now that set the stage of what the United States, wants to achieve on the African continent. Now, under different governments, the Democrats and the Republicans, this relationship, they have attempted to show that when you are with the Republicans, it is different. When you are with the Democrats, oh, it's gonna be different. Like how you see that people like Trump, they come out and say it like it is and say you are shithole. Your countries are shithole countries, like that. And the Democrats, of course, they come and they say, oh no, you are not shithole. But on the whole, the relationship is the same. Is that of extraction and patronizing and telling Africans what to do. All right. And so today, you look at people like the Undersecretary of State, who's Fraser, Jendai Fraser. She is trying to reshape that relationship, and she's trying to warn the United States. And of course, she was even at the U.S. Africa Summit in 2022, which happened. She's trying to reshape that relationship into a relationship which at least the United States doesn't come to the African continent wagging its finger. I think she calls it wagging its finger, because the relationship has, apart from being an exploitative relationship, it has been that of patronizing and coming to the African continent to tell the Africans what to do. The United States is coming to teach Africans what to do. All right. And it's like the Africans are children of the United States. They are children of the United States. So the United States can come across and say, you have to do this. You have to operate in this kind of manner. Your government should be like this. This is what defines democracy. All right. Even though we know that the type of democracy in the United States is different from many of the countries on the African continent. And of course, we have different histories, and the fact that the United States participated in slavery, and extracting, slave labor from the African continent, and Africans participated in the building of this country, you can't conclude that the United States has the same history. And you can't conclude again that the United States was built, on, using democracy, because democracy, even for the black people, for the Africans in the United States, came just recently in 1964 with the Civil Rights Bill, Civil Rights Bill of 1964. So this, of course, while the United States has moved in that direction, it has put, of course, some questions, on its activities on the African continent, because now we have questions. If you are saying that you are here to help the Africans develop, and of course with programs which they say there is PEPFAR, that the United States is investing about 9 billion, I don't know, $11 billion every year in PEPFAR, we ask, show us where that money is, where the Africans are benefiting from that money that you are saying you are investing $11 billion every year, under PEPFAR, whatever it is. So we don't see where that money is invested. Really, where's the infrastructure that you are investing in? Where are the African organizations that are benefiting from this money? So these are the questions that now we have started asking. So it looks, from the look of things, that the US policy, is a continuation of what happened, since the 1960s, 1950s, 1960s. That is that of, the US pushing its interests in the African continent by saying, you have to do this, you have to do that. And what we are realizing also is that this relationship, or this strategy of the US saying that there should be democracy in Africa, is not really because the US loves democracy or wants us to live in a, an amicable society, but rather is because it wants to manipulate these democratic institutions in Africa to benefit itself. It wants to install, leaders on the African continent passing through this system, because it has a lot of money. Many of these, we have seen them, they get a lot of money for campaigns and all that. They want to use this to have, like a perpetual domination, perpetual control of the African continent, using money which they have
So it's
plenty.
like a colony, but legal, which
Yes,
our heads of
yes,
state agree to it.
yes. Yes, so which is hidden now. This is hidden with the fact, it is hidden behind the narrative that you are promoting democracy, and therefore people are living in a harmonious society. But hidden behind is this colonization, of course, which Nkrumah called
But again,
neocolonialism. Hidden.
allow me to come in here. Hidden probably for the mass, but when they come to restore that, I mean, to whatever they're saying it has value, democracy or whatever in your country, then they know what our heads of states know that exactly what's going to follow, right? I mean, if we do this, you do this, like what they are getting into, no?
Yeah, absolutely. They know, but of course, these guys too. They have their own interests as heads of state, because for them, there's nothing better than, being a head of state. To enjoy all the luxuries. So if this system is going to help you to stay in that position and enjoy all the luxuries and benefits of being, a head of state, because for a man, of course, there's nothing, as important as, being powerful, having, possessing power and being in power. Because when you have power, you are in power. As a leader, you have access to these resources, almost unlimited resources. You can control all these resources of your nation. And so, you find that this system which the United States has encouraged on the African continent is not delivering, the goods for the African people, is not delivering development for the African people, but rather the United States as the leader of the West, they are the ones who have benefited from this. And we see this even in countries like Niger recently, that before Mohamed Bazoum, Mahmoud, I don't know, Bazoum, President Bazoum of Niger, before he was removed, right? You see that Blinken, they were frequenting this space. They were frequenting Niger and saying that Bazoum is causing a lot of reforms. All right, these are the words which are normally used. So we don't know until when these reforms are going to be carried out before the Africans can benefit from the so-called reforms of the United States and its World Bank and the IMF, which it controls, of course, and other institutions. Because since the 1960s, we have been carrying out reforms. So the questions now which the Africans are asking, until when are these reforms are going to go on before we can benefit? All right, because reform, they say we should carry out reform, and we have carried out all types of reforms. So this is what they were saying when it came to Bazoum in Niger. They were praising him, but when we go to the ground and we see what is happening with the people, about 80% of the people don't have access to electricity. All right, and the United States is there, and the United States is there even today. Through its institutions, you see that when you go to Sierra Leone, for example, 90% of the people, they don't have access to electricity, and this is not exaggeration when it comes to Sierra Leone, to some of these countries, because I've been there myself. I've been to these countries, right? I've been to Sierra Leone. 90% of the people don't have access to electricity, and yet we have the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund misusing money, and you see that they are lending more money to, for example, to Ghana. They are lending more money to Kenya and stuff like that. Some of the countries which are at least well off. All right. Now, then you see that these people are not really interested in making the continent better. That's not really what they are interested in. All right. They are interested just in maintaining, Western domination. All right, Western domination. And I think the person who put it better, it was Geno Michael Langley. No, it's not. Yeah, it's Geno Michael Langley, when he was asked before, Congress, a House Committee Congress. General Langley, they asked him, why are we there in Niger? Because of the United States, the problems it is facing in Niger. They asked him, why are we there in Niger, for example? He said, we are there for, we are there for influence. We are there for for domination, for access, right? For access. But rather what he meant is access to resources. So you can see that in this, you can plainly see that he is not, the US is not interested in making any improvement in the lives of the African people, but the continuing of domination, all right, and through social engineering, which we have spoken about here, and which my friend, of course, Franklin Jones, who was once a US Marine who served in Iraq, mentioned that the US is interested in social engineering and to prepare the minds of the people in these societies, so that these people can accept the domination of the United States, so that these people can abandon any of their institutions, their cultural institutions, the institutions which governed them, or which can govern them even better. They should have abandoned them. These people should abandon these institutions and, acquiesce with the institutions of the United States and what the United States wants to do in these, countries. And therefore, it means that they want the continent to continue as a place for extraction of cheap labor. That is number one, as it was in slavery. Number two, the continuation of extraction of raw materials from the African continent. All right. And then, of course, to use it as a market of their cheap products, because we have seen the United States trying to reindustrialize, to try to bring back their industries. We have seen Biden's efforts to try to reindustrialize, at the United States, because they think that industries had already run out of the United States. Now, these, of course, would be for them to manufacture products which are cheaper, maybe to compete with China, and come and dump them in Africa as a market. So this is what we are seeing on the whole when on the whole when we read into the activities of the United States, and of course its militarization of the continent, is all meant in that.
Thank you, Kwame, really, for that. It's a very wide, of course, entering point. Talking about now the whole package that the US comes with to Africa as it is foreign policy, can you tell us, first of all, what are these values? Okay, we mentioned democracy, and then if they go along also with our own values, with African values, and is it necessary at all for it to come with any value, meaning for example, again, democracy is a good example. Africa do not have its own democracy. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question. It's the US's approach, whereby it wants to come to the continent with what it calls its values. Uh, I think it speaks to you know uh, the desire to humiliate, the Africans. I think there's a drive. This drives it as well. The fact that you think that your values are better than another society, and therefore you should come and impose them. I mean, you have to be driven by some level of superiority, of thinking that you are superior than the other person before you can say, okay, you are. I mean, you can't go to somebody's house and say, okay, I want you to run your house, like how I run my house. Okay. And of course,
Mhm.
people can justify it either way in different manners, because many people have said, oh, who plays the piper, calls the tune and stuff like that. Who pays the piper, calls the tune, stuff like that. Therefore, it in itself speaks to, of course, some level of arrogancy, but also racism. All right, because you think that these societies, for the United States itself, is a country which has existed for less than 300 years, right? So you may ask yourself a question. So if the United States is saying that it's bringing values, what values is it bringing to societies which have been here for thousands of years, really? Like,
Yeah.
we have, our societies have been here
Yeah.
for thousands of years with their own values. So what is it? What values do you have that you are bringing? You are less than 300 years. Your country is less than 300 years. What values are you trying to bring to these people? And so this is where the question then comes in. Are they real values, or they are just selfish values? Values built on selfishness, because you are hiding what you want to achieve behind those values, which is the exploitation of resources. And that is what we are seeing, right? Because you want these people to be in your image, and so you want to social engineer their society so that they can acquiesce to your exploitation, so that they can accept your exploitation of their resources and their societies, and destruction of their societies. So I think this is what I see, but it is really unnecessary for the US to come to the continent and claim that they are coming with their values, and therefore the Africans must acquiesce to these values. Must the Africans must accept the US values before they can have a relationship with the United States. And this is where China actually has been beating them, because China doesn't come here to claim that I'm coming here, I'm bringing some values. It's not necessary for you even to come with, with any values. And of course, that is what Jendai Fraser, the U.S. Undersecretary, State Secretary of State, Under Secretary, is talking about the United States, that it's not necessary for us to go to Africa with values. And of course, the racism itself has not gone away, even though on the international stage they claim that, okay, the era of slavery and colonialism is over, but the racism is still there. The racism is still there and is hidden. All right, they come through it and they pump it in through these institutions and these so-called values. So the racism now is hidden in these so-called values, and therefore they want to use this to engineer our society to look like Europeans, or an inferior. I think Nkrumah called it an inferior copy. They want to create inferior copies of European society. So when you see a black man, he's a white man, right? But an inferior copy of a white man. All right. And this is why Nkrumah actually during independence, the announcement at independence, Nkrumah said that we are going to create our own African personality and identity. All right. When he's announcing independence in Ghana in 1957 on March, I think it was March 7th when Ghana got its independence, he said that we are going to create our own African personality and identity, because Nkrumah understood that uh, the African has been made a carbon copy of the European. He doesn't have, his identity has been almost decimated, it has been almost destroyed. So the African needed reconstruction. All right, his consciousness in itself needed a reconstruction. But for the United States is fighting very hard to make sure that the African does not attain that objective of reconstructing himself and his continent. And of course, that includes his economy and his society, rebuilding his society. The United States, working with its European allies, they are fighting very hard to make sure that the African does not achieve that objective. And therefore, they work around the clock with their intelligence agencies, with their media platforms, with their everything to make sure that they demonize Africans and then show them that they are the worst people. The Africans are the worst people, they are the most corrupt people. But they don't show you the other part, that most of the money that flows out of the African continent is really not taken by Africans. It's taken by Western corporations. Most of the money that is coming from this continent, and of course, including the World Bank and the IMF, they play a part. They are financial institutions, they are, mining corporations. All these are playing a part. They don't show you this part, that it is really not the Africans who are taking mostly from the African continent. Is the West which is taking. So there is that concerted effort to continue pushing the African down. And of course, we have seen it even with Dangote, who we have analyzed for a very long time, that the refinery itself, we know that is going to benefit Africa, because Africa is not, adding value to its resources. It's going to benefit the African continent. But the West comes in and attacks the refinery, which it knows that is going to benefit the Africans, because we don't have any facility which is refining these resources for us. So instead of supporting this effort, then they come out and attack this effort that the Africans are making for themselves, because the United States for a long time has refused to make investment in the African continent. Is investing in war, in destruction in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. More than $1 trillion was spent over there. So imagine what $1 trillion could do on the African continent if they came and helped Africa to build its infrastructure so that Africa can raise the lives of people. But look at what they're investing in Ukraine in 3 months, right? In 3 months, $160 billion, they send it over there. For Africa, they say, we will give you 50, we will cooperate with you, and we have pledged for $55 billion in 3 years, right? In Ukraine, you give in 1 month $60 billion, you sign in Congress, $60 billion is going to Ukraine, right? In Africa, 3 years, $55 billion of pledge. And even the $55 billion, what is unfortunate is that when you go and check the $55 billion, is also not coming to the African continent and is wrapped in ambiguous terms, right? That we are going to improve communication systems in Africa. We are going to improve entrepreneurship. So all these are just ambiguous, statements and terms and, and slogans, which really do not address anything on the African continent, on the ground in the African continent. So the relationship with the United States then, it becomes that of, clearly it becomes that of, humiliating the African people and continuing, dominating them, right? And extracting value from them, at the same time telling them that what they are doing is wrong. Because look, the institutions we are running is the United States, which has been guiding this process of us to run these particular institutions, which are called, democracy, right? But then they come around and say that we are not doing it the right way. All right. From the 60s, from the 70s, everyone in Africa, they have embraced this Western way of looking at governance. But every day they come again and they tell us, you are not doing it the right way. And yet they are over here supervising that process every day. Every single day they are over here on the continent supervising that process. And we accepted since the 70s to run this system, which they say. Now, for the Africans, then the question arises: what are you guys now trying to achieve? What are you trying to tell us? If we have run this system, in places like Niger, that's why you see that people are asking now questions in Burkina Faso. If we have run this system for 60 years after independence, and you told us this system works, and it has not delivered anything for us, it has not delivered the value that we are looking for, because it is not us about running this particular system, but what we want. People are not just running these ideas, because democracy itself is an idea, but what we are looking for is the improvement, the social and upward economic, mobility, social economic mobility, of our people. The lives of our people have to be improved. Now, if they are not improving, and we have run this your system, but at the same time you are insulting us and telling us that we are not running it the right way, you need to do reform this, reform that, and we have done reforms and reforms. So now this becomes a relationship that is very difficult to define. All right, and that is why we see that in some countries now people have started separating themselves from the United States, and the United States doesn't understand, or they claim not to understand, at least. Okay, they claim not to understand this relationship. That is what they claim. So I don't know whether they are living in a different world, but I know that they have all this data. They should be able to understand that when the consciousness of people increases, then the people are going to figure you out what you are trying to do on the African continent, and you are not trying to improve their lives. So these values which the United States comes with, they in themselves, they have not delivered for the African continent, and that is the truth. That is the ultimate truth. As we see today, ever since we started implementing this system, and what we have achieved from it is the patronizing us, patronizing the African continent, and of course, humiliation, and of course, insulting, while they're imposing these governments on us, and imposing these neo-colonial leaders on us. They add the insults onto this imposition of these leaders on the African continent. They say that the Africans, they don't know how to run those systems, and therefore reforms must come and stuff like that. So and this is the very reason why they have to resort now to propaganda to be able to counter the new consciousness that has risen out of the continent. You have now to resort to propaganda and say, oh, Russia is doing this, Russia is that, because of the failure to accept that your policies have failed on the continent, the failure to accept that your social engineering on the African continent has failed. So now they resort to propaganda, go around, say Russia is the one which is causing all these problems. And of course, the allegation and the claim that Russia is the one who is causing all these problems on the African continent in itself is very condescending, and again, humiliating to the Africans, and is insulting in itself to the Africans, because this claim, shows or attempts to show that Africans don't have a thinking of their own to understand that our relationship with the United States has not been working. All right. And therefore, we don't want this system where these leaders who are supported by the United States, like Bazoum, are staying over there. They are not producing anything, because, like we said, the purpose for democracy as a procedure, democracy is a procedure, is not what we are looking for, really. What we are looking for is the improvement of lives of the people. So if this procedure is not delivering the improved lives that we are looking for, then this procedure has to be changed. We have to bring in a different procedure. And so this is what the people, are looking for on the continent. Therefore, it is humiliating and insulting to the Africans for the United States to say that it is Russia which is, inciting Africans against the United States. So it's like saying that these are robots, or these are foolish people. You can just go over there and program them. Anyone can just go over there and program them. And therefore, if they change their mind, is because somebody has programmed them to change their mind against us, because we have been programming them in a certain way, which in itself is extremely, extremely insulting on the part of the United States, towards the Africans. So this is what its values have produced on the African continent, and that is why the Chinese for a long time since 2020 have been victorious, or they have been successful with Africa, more than the United States.
Yeah, it's really to the point that, as you said, we have started to perceive it as, oh, okay, our relation with the US did not work. We have to do this, we have to do that, so they do their reform. And also sometimes we see also our people, I don't know, some of them maybe finalized by the invisible hands, having the US flag to remove the head of state from there. It's just crazy how we are brainwashed. I mean, to what extent? Well, finally, I want to ask you, do you think now that with the current change that we are seeing in the continent, for example, in the Sahel states, that the US is achieving what it wants to achieve in terms of its policy that it's exporting to Africa?
I mean,
Or can we say this is the beginning of the end?
I think that it's very clear to see for anyone who is seeing what is happening. The US has been expelled from its most important, one of its most important military base, which is in Niger, where it used to fly drones, all over the African continent and spy on all the African continent. It has been expelled from there where it flies, these drones from. And of course, it may take them, somewhere else, or it may take them to Nigeria, because we have seen U.S. military aircrafts which have been flying into Lagos, at the airport. So, but it is clear to see that the U.S. policy in Africa has failed. It's very clear to see the fact that you have to abandon what you are calling $100 million, airport, as if it matters to the African people. It doesn't matter, how it could be 500 billion, or it could be whatever billion, it could even be $1 trillion airport. This doesn't really matter, to the African people. But it is evident that the policy has failed, even though right now it is trying to come back, through the International Monetary Fund, of course, which we are seeing hugely these days on the African continent. Yet we have not been seeing, the IMF for the last 20 years a lot. Right now it is trying to come back hugely. So the US is trying to come back through that. But the policy itself, uh, US's foreign policy on the African continent has failed. So when it comes to the people themselves, because they govern, the people have to consent. So and of course, it has resorted to the propaganda and uh, buying out some presidents on the African continent. We saw people like Ruto, Nana Addo, these groups of people, these types of people, Tinubu. All these are sales out, sellouts, and of course, we see it applying threats, using threats. So I think that the moment you start using threats, it absolutely shows that you are out of line. I mean, you have failed. Your policies have failed, because it is using threats. You will remove you from AGOA, these tactics, right? And then they pass a bill in the United States Congress, the bill called HR 7, I think it's called 7311, which was a bill which was saying that Russia is carrying out maligning activities in Africa. Therefore, they need to come to Africa and counter Russia by any means necessary. And that means, of course, as General Langley, said, who is the AFRICOM commander, U.S. AFRICOM commander, say that they need to invest more in propaganda across the continent in the media. And even when you go to Twitter, actually, you could see this. So all these, I think they show failure. They show failure, policy failure on the part of the African continent. And mind you, there has not been any serious fight against them on the African continent, from the point that President Muammar Gaddafi was removed from power because of course they use that divide and conquer. But there has not been a serious fight against him since President Muammar Gaddafi was killed. So they're resorting to these measures, intimidation, propaganda, to heighten up the propaganda, which even General Angle said that they want to increase their propaganda on the African continent. And because again they were saying that it's because of Russia, but Russia doesn't have media platforms on the African continent. Even themselves, they banned RT News, which was being broadcast on DSTV, which is multi-choice. They banned it from DSTV, all right, the Western world, because they control that platform. Multi-choice, we know it's based in South Africa, and it was broadcasting RT News of Russia. So across the continent. So they banned it so that Africans cannot receive this news. But we had General Angle saying that they have to increase, their penetration of their news and their propaganda news, their media penetration in the African continent. And this to me is because of failure to accept the facts on the ground. They are failing to accept the facts on the ground that these people, are more conscious of what is happening, of what we have done in Libya. Instead, what we did in 1993 in Somalia, we went over there and destroyed that country. These things are even on the movies. They did movies, Black Hawk Down. You see, so it is ridiculous for the United States even to come around and start saying all these things that they are saying. That is because of Russian, influence. That is why people hate us on the African continent. People they don't like us. I think it shows that they have failed to do self reflection. All right, the failure to do self reflection is what is leading, to this, that the United States is approaching things in this manner instead of sitting down and saying, okay, we need to re-strategize, we need to re-engage in a different way. For the last 60 years, we have been engaging, in a manner which is not acceptable to the people. Let us change how we are engaging. Let us really be friendly to these people, because the African people themselves are not really that bad people that they are not forgiving. The African people have been forgiving for a long time. Many of the African people, they know that the United States participated in the destruction of the continent through the removal of leaders. But the African people still, they continue to forgive the West and they want to engage. So it looks like this being forgiving, this act of forgiving them, the United States has decided to take this as a weakness. And therefore, we have to bombard them with more propaganda until they accept more operation from us. More, they should accept more of our domination. All right. So I think this is what I see from the United States, and I hope that answers your question. I hope that answers your question.
But of course, they are resisting to accept the reality on the ground, but they do see that they are failing, that they cannot continue
Yeah,
imposing.
yeah. So what I think is that, however much they try, because of this consciousness and the fact that the continent has attained a level of literacy rate now. Remember that in the 40s, in the 60s, we were very low on literacy rate, maybe around 20%, 30%. Now we are 70%. So you don't expect the people who have this level of literacy rate to behave the same way they were behaving. And yet the United States is behaving like we are still in the 60s. That we are going to go over there and dominate them, continue to dominate them. The people who are conscious of their environment and your environment, and they know how you built your country, that you used our labor. You were not built through democracy. The people know all these things. The African people know all these things. So for you to think, as the United States, to think that you're going to engage the continent on the same level which we engaged it in the 1960s. I mean, this absolutely shows policy failure, that you are not achieving the objectives. And of course, that is shown through General Langley's appearance before the Congress. He's mentioning that Russia is the one penetrating. There's no Russia influence over here when it comes to media. There's no Russia NGOs. If there's anyone with NGOs which have blanketed all the African continent is the West. But if your NGOs and media propaganda and systems, you are the one who controls the platforms which the Africans use, the Facebook. There's no Russian Facebook over here. There's no Russian Twitter. You see, there's no Russian YouTube. Now, if you have all these instruments that you're controlling Africa with, and you are still failing, absolutely, this shows that it's policy failure, complete policy failure. So you can't blame the Russians for this, really. So it is the people who have realized that you are not a good partner, and your relation, being in a relationship with you is not productive. It has not been productive, and it's not productive, and it's not going to be productive. For the rest, of our engagement with you. So I think that this is what the United States is not realizing, is failing to accept. Let me say.
Yeah, that's a problem. Thank you very much, Kwame. I think we are covered for what we plan to cover tonight with regards to U.S. Foreign policy towards Africa. I was reading the chat section. Yeah, okay. So was this Greta Woodson? First of all, thank you, Greta Woodson, for being here. And she said she's the one. She said I can listen to Kwame for hours. I think it's her comment, right? But I agree with that. Sometimes, let me tell you what happens behind the scene. We have phone conversations before we come to you. There's a lot of chat and there's a lot of phone conversation. It's not just that we appear here. So, as you may assume, and sometimes I tell him, I ask him something, or he start to talk about something, and he just gone 10 minutes, 12. Kwame, I should have recorded you and just put that straight on the chat. That's it. So yeah, it happens to me too. So that's your credit, by the way. So Kwame, great Tautsa, who said she can listen for 1 hour. And thank you on the hairstyle. Okay, so some of you,
So,
maybe
so,
we need to
so you see,
organize
Malik.
a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. So you see, Malik. The problem is, and the worst of all, there's no people telling the United States the real truth, right? So it has surrounded itself with these Africans who want to benefit from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who want to eat, like they are receiving these dollars and big accounts and stuff like that. So they don't tell them that you people, you have really to set, you have to put your house in order. The people are not accepting this, right? What you are doing is really not good, and you have to change this relationship. All right. And maybe, probably, it is because they know that the United States will not change. All right, it will not change. Maybe that is why, it could be the reason why they are not telling it, because they have these Africans, of course, which they work with. Of course, the African continent has more than 54 representatives at the United Nations in New York. All right, so you should be able to get, like, the real information. But do they really want to listen to what these people want to say? Probably they don't want to do that. And they have all these programs, when they invite Africa, US Africa Summit, you have all these people. Can't you really collect the data and ask them what is really the problem? But I think that they have the data. My understanding is that they have this data, but they just don't want
Yeah.
to agree that this is the truth. They just want to move in the opposite direction of the truth and say, no, we have to dominate. They are driven by perpetual racism and domination. This is what is, like, they are psychologically, tuned. They have tuned their mind that they have to continue the domination at whatever cost. If it means destruction of the whole world, we have to dominate the world. If the world doesn't want us to dominate it, we'd rather destroy it than cooperating with it, but we will dominate. I think this is the mindset, which I see with the Europeans and the United States, of course, as their leadership.
Yeah. Reading in the chat section, Bonsu Bigwell said AES has already stated that openly, I think, That's what he or she meant. Openly stated that countries such as Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana will not be included in AES, even if they express their interest. Okay, why? Cote d'Ivoire, I understand. It's totally a lost case as long as Ouattara is in the throne. Ghana, I don't know. I don't know why Ghana. See, Index, there was a part that in one of the chats you said, whatever they are sending the money, it's not really coming to Africa. Yeah, it's not. It's just benefiting their own people. If it's a humanitarian aid, it's benefiting their farmers. If it is a military aid, it's benefiting their producers. It's all, and they give you a loan, and then they force you to buy. I don't know, it could be Boeing in Ethiopian Airlines case. So that the money can be kept, that the money, they will make sure the money don't leave their thing. It just sad sometimes, the level of stupidity, ignorance, I don't know what to call it, our heads of states are in. Yeah, they are all the same. Was it the Bongswell and others also here? You have been talking about the U.S. Whether Republican or Democrat, it's all the same for Africa. Yeah, it's all the same. Somebody behind that thing is running the country. It's not just Democrats or Republicans. That's just a hype to the people. As John Henry Clark said, nothing the European mind ever devised was meant to nothing but dominate the world. That's true. Okay, seeing they say Ghana president was snitching on Burkina Faso. Oh, okay, I remember that happened in 2022, in December during the US Africa summit. They were like sitting across the table, Blinken there, here Nana Akufo-Addo, and telling you, I wonder if you can, with his. That's a high English. I clearly remember that speech of Nana Akufo-Addo. I call it a speech, but the conversation that they have was a Ghanaian delegation led by Akufo-Addo and Blinken on the other side for the US in 2022. That we came and analyzed here. Actually, it has got a good view. So yeah, we found out why Ghana was mentioned. It will never be part of IES. It's because of your president, what he said to Blinken. You remember the 2022 summit, Africa?
Absolutely.
We analyzed it, and it was a time I think the channel was growing. It already, and it was, oh my God, many people have seen that video. That Nana Akufo-Addo is another one. Oh, this is from Traore himself. He said that. Okay. Well, I think that's it. It's a Friday. Thank you all for being here. Thanks again. Please share the video with others and continue to support us in whatever you can. Also give it a like if you find it. What we bring you here is informative. Informative enough to you. And then don't keep the information and the knowledge to yourself. Please share the video in whatever network you are in. Subscribe if you haven't done that so far. Our PayPal account channel is in the description section, but you can also do it through what is it called, super chat, super thanks, something like that. And we will see you again. We will be here, whether is a solo reports that we are doing, we bringing to you, or together we will be definitely we are active on the weekend. But yeah, just tune in. Thank you all for being here. It's a ciao ciao from us. Bye, and thank you, Kwame, as well.
Thank you, Mahlet, and thank you everyone for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel on Rumble. Please go out there and subscribe to our channel on Rumble and support the channel. Please like the video. We have 31 people in here, and also share it with other people. If you are new, please kindly subscribe to the platform and invite other people. This is extremely important, because we want this message to go out to as many people, as many African people as possible. So
To keep my word, okay, sorry. Lion, there was a very important lion rules the jungle. He or she was even before us, very early here, and he or she asked the real question. I mean, after watching, I think the title, the real question is, what is Africa's policy in Africa? That should be, I think he or she is suggesting that should be a topic that we should
yeah.
discuss. If you have
Malik,
something to say, I can send the link right now, because we said that if you want to contribute anything, we will invite. It's Friday. Let me know.
yeah,
Or should
Malik,
I?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I think that we can find a topic on that to explore. Since we didn't have a lot of time, we could explore the foreign policy of Russia, foreign policy of Middle East, the Arabs, Indians, and all of them put their foreign policy together. What is Africa's foreign policy? And we look at it from that context. I think that would be a great idea. So let's put that on our calendar.
Yeah, definitely. It would, yeah, some of us will be surprised, really. What is the priority for our heads of state when it comes to foreign policy? Yeah. So I just put in, I am giving a few minutes if somebody wants to join. So I put the link if someone wants to join, and you don't have to be on video. If you, yeah, if you want to, you can just put the audio. The GOP is better for Africa. Well, I'm not sure, and I if no one, we will call it. Yeah, if there's no one, it's fine then, because I haven't seen no one. Okay, Kwame, I think, yeah, we can close it. Yeah. Thank you all, and bye bye. Thanks.